the hidden prayer rich people use for abundance. They never wanted you to say these words, not out loud, not in the quiet of night, not even in a whisper between breaths. Because something happens when you do, something that defies the program. See, before the banks, before the systems of debt, before the illusion of lack was etched into your nervous system like a scar passed down through generations, there was a vibration, a frequency so ancient, so aligned with the original nature of existence, that to even speak it aloud was to tear holes in the scripts of control. They called it heresy, witchcraft, dangerous mysticism, but in truth, it was wealth. Not the counterfeit kind printed on paper and worshipped in silence, but the living current of divine abundance. And this prayer was once carved into stone by a forgotten civilization, buried beneath cathedrals and rewritten by councils who feared its power. They told you prosperity was earned through obedience. That struggle was noble, that you had to be humble, small, and grateful for crumbs, but deep down, something in you remembers. A line, a sound, a syllable older than gold. You don't know where it came from, but you've heard it. In dreams, in silence, in the stillness between thoughts. And now somehow you're here, listening. Maybe it's fate, maybe it's memory, maybe it's your soul pulling threads from the past, demanding remembrance. But one thing is certain, this is no coincidence. Because the moment you speak what was forbidden, reality begins to shift. Energy rearranges, resistance dissolves, and the walls that held back your inheritance begin to crack. But wait, before we go further, comment where you're watching this from, and make sure to like and subscribe if something inside you already knows this truth. Because what you're about to hear is not just a prayer, it's the return of a forgotten frequency, the frequency of wealth you were born to embody. They won't tell you this, but the wealthiest people on the planet don't just work harder, they vibrate differently. You think they got rich through logic and effort alone? That's the story they sell: hustle, grind, sacrifice. But in private, behind closed doors, they speak words you were never taught. Words that pull reality toward them like gravity. They're not just chasing wealth. They're aligning with it, commanding it, summoning it through frequencies passed down in silence. One former assistant of a hedge fund billionaire once whispered, "He prays every morning, but not to God the way we do. He says strange things in another language, then he smiles, and the markets move in his favor like magic." That assistant was fired a week later. No explanation, just silence. That's how protected this is. Because if you knew the script, if you remembered the true language of abundance, the spell would break. The system doesn't fear your ambition. It fears your alignment. It fears you speaking the words that shift your frequency from survival to sovereignty. That prayer isn't just a prayer, it's a code, a vibration that reprograms your mind, body, and energy field to receive. Not beg, not hope. Receive. The ultra-rich call it personal discipline, but it's really energetic design. They wake before sunrise, speak the forbidden syllables, and attune themselves like instruments to a frequency you were trained to forget. Think about it. Why do some people attract opportunities effortlessly while others drown in delay no matter how hard they try? It's not luck, it's not chance, it's resonance. And the system made sure you were always out of tune, until now. Because what you're hearing, what you're remembering, is the sound of your original wealth blueprint reactivating, and it begins with a single sound, a single phrase, spoken from the right place within. But we'll get there. First, let's expose how the system trained you to block it in the first place. From the moment you could speak, they began the training. Money doesn't grow on trees. Rich people are greedy. Be happy with what you have. Harmless phrases, right? No, they were seeds, coded affirmations planted into the soil of your subconscious. You didn't notice it then, but every time you heard those words, your energy shifted, your body tensed, your breath shortened, your field dimmed. The system didn't just tell you to fear money, it made you feel unworthy of it. And the deeper tragedy? You believed it. You wore poverty like an identity. You dimmed your desires not because you didn't have them, but because having them made you feel ashamed. Because somewhere along the line, someone whispered that abundance was for them, not for you. That wealth was dangerous, that wanting more made you selfish. But ask yourself, who benefits when you live small? When you settle? When you silence your hunger and call it humility, the truth is, the system needed you poor. Poor in pocket, poor in vision, poor in frequency. Because a person aligned with abundance becomes impossible to control. That's why they mocked the mystics, burned the books, rewrote the texts. The earliest versions of sacred scriptures spoke of overflow, divine inheritance, riches beyond measure, not just as metaphor but as actual embodied reality. But those pages were edited, buried, replaced with sermons of suffering. You were taught to pray for mercy instead of remembering your divine right to abundance. This was never about money alone. It was about your power, because true wealth is not what you have, it's what you allow. And if you allowed it fully, the illusion of control would collapse. So they fed you fear disguised as wisdom, scarcity wrapped in spirituality, and you repeated it daily until your cells forgot how to receive. But something in you never stopped listening, something ancient, a flicker, a sound, a memory. That's why you're still here, because buried beneath the layers of programming, you still remember the original language, the sound of fullness, and very soon, you will speak it again. This isn't a prayer you recite with your lips alone. It's a frequency you embody, a magnetic field that pulses from your chest, altering the invisible architecture around you. That's why it was hidden, not because it's dangerous in words, but because it awakens something dormant in you. When you speak it, you're not asking. You're not begging some distant sky god to throw you a bone. No, you're activating memory. You're speaking from the part of you that never forgot you were born to be wealthy, not just financially, but vibrationally, spiritually, cellularly. This is why traditional prayers failed you. They came from a place of separation. They echoed with lack, please help me, please give me. But this prayer, this one, it comes from unity, from knowing, from commanding. It doesn't plead, it declares. And that declaration begins to tear through the veil that's kept abundance at arm's length. It's subtle at first, a flicker, a strange stillness. You might feel warmth in your chest, a light pressure in your forehead. Your breath might deepen without effort. That's the energy responding, reality, adjusting. And when you keep repeating it, day after day, minute after minute, the system begins to glitch. Old patterns collapse, delays vanish. People start looking at you differently. Opportunities arrive that weren't even in your realm before. You stop chasing and start attracting. But here's the part they fear most. Once this shift happens inside you, it becomes permanent. You can't be reprogrammed. You can't be manipulated by fear. You stop reacting to the world and begin rewriting it. That's why they worked so hard to erase this, because if even a handful of people remembered the code, remembered the sound, it would spread, and the spell of poverty would disintegrate. But now you're here. You've heard the beginning. And in a moment, I'll show you how to say it. But first, you need to understand why they replaced the original prayer with empty repetition, and who really benefits from your silence. They didn't just erase the original prayer, they replaced it. They took something potent, electric, alive, and diluted it until it was nothing more than empty words echoing in stone halls. You've felt it, haven't you? That sense that something's missing when you pray the way they taught you. That hollow ring, like a beautiful shell with no ocean inside. That's not your fault. It was by design. Because when the old empires realized that true wealth came from within, from sound, breath, alignment, they had two choices: share it or suppress it. And suppression always pays more. So they rewrote the sacred texts. Councils gathered in hidden chambers and debated which words were safe to give the masses. They removed every passage that reminded you of your power. Every reference to overflow, to divine inheritance, to heaven on earth was labeled symbolic or worse, heretical. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, those same institutions practiced the original rituals in secret. Yes, the very leaders who preached poverty as virtue performed wealth invocations at sunrise while telling you salvation came through suffering. Banks did the same. They don't want you wealthy. They want you aspiring to be, forever chasing, never arriving. Because when you're chasing, you're predictable, controllable, programmable. But a person who remembers their sovereign frequency of abundance, that person can't be sold lies. They don't beg for loans, they don't fear the economy, they become the economy. That's why entire financial systems were built on scarcity, interest rates, limited supply, inflation, all illusions rooted in the idea that there isn't enough. But your soul remembers a different truth, that wealth is a reflection, not a resource, that the real currency is consciousness. And the original prayer? It was never about asking for money. It was about becoming the field that generates it. That's what they feared. Not your bank balance, but your frequency. And the moment you start to pray the way they do behind closed doors, the moment you stop speaking like a servant and start vibrating like a creator, the game ends, and a new one begins. You're not supposed to hear this, not here, not now, and yet your body is already responding before I even speak the first syllable. That warmth you feel in your chest, that's not emotion. That's memory, cellular ancient ancestral memory. Because this prayer isn't new, you've said it before, and in another life, another tongue, another version of yourself, not bound by systems or fear. And when I speak the first words, something inside you will tremble, not in fear, but in recognition. The original prayer isn't long. It doesn't need to be. Like lightning, its power is in its charge. It begins with a breath, deep, slow, through the nose, pulling energy from the earth, through your spine. Then it begins. Elazar, Onkai, Teshu Ma'el. Do you feel that? You don't need to understand it. That's the trap of the modern mind, always needing logic, meaning, permission. But this isn't for your intellect, this is for your frequency. These words weren't meant to be understood, they were meant to be remembered, spoken not with voice alone, but with presence, with intention. These syllables carry the imprint of wealth as design, not desire. And when you say them, not as a wish, but as a return, the field around you shifts, thoughts slow, resistance softens. You may feel lightheaded or deeply grounded, or both at once. That's the signal. That's the gate. Most will never speak these words, even after hearing them. Their programming runs too deep. But you stayed. You listened. And now it's waking up inside you. The blueprint is unfolding. And this is only the beginning. Because there are more layers, deeper tones, hidden sequences within the sound. In the next moment, we go further. We reveal what happens when this prayer is combined with aligned action, and why that's the step they fear most. Because when sound meets embodiment, reality obeys. They never told you that the real power isn't just in the words. It's in how you move after you say them. The frequency alone begins the shift, yes, but the transformation locks in only when your actions match your vibration. That's why most people fail. They chant affirmations, they say mantras, they light candles, but they do it from fear, from doubt, from desperation. And the field doesn't respond to words, it responds to coherence, alignment. The system made sure you stayed fragmented, that you'd speak one thing and live another. They knew that as long as your mouth said abundance but your spine said anxiety, you'd stay stuck. But the moment you walk like someone who is already wealthy, not arrogantly, not superficially, but energetically, the entire grid rearranges around you. One man once said, "I spoke the prayer for a week and then I walked into the meeting like I'd already closed the deal. I didn't fake confidence, I was confidence." That's when everything changed. He didn't just say the words, he embodied them. That's the hidden key. When your breath, your posture, your tone, your decisions all sing in the same frequency as the prayer, doors appear where there were only walls. Emails arrive that make no logical sense. Money flows from forgotten sources. People call you, saying, "I don't know why, but I feel like I need to work with you." This isn't magic, it's law. The law they buried beneath bureaucracy and dogma. The elite don't pray for money. They merge with it. They become the signal that wealth seeks. And now, you're doing the same. Every breath you take after that ancient sound is an opportunity to choose. Will you return to the old rhythm or step forward in full frequency? Because the next part of the prayer isn't spoken aloud. It's lived. It's the way you respond to fear, the way you invest in yourself, the way you no longer ask for permission to want more. And that's what makes it dangerous. Because once you become the prayer, the system can no longer contain you. At first, it will feel like coincidence. A refund you weren't expecting, a phone call from someone you haven't spoken to in years, now offering a connection, a resource, a door. You'll brush it off. Funny timing, you'll think, but it won't stop there. The signals will multiply. The algorithm will start showing you opportunities you never searched for. A stranger will speak words that match your inner dialogue exactly. It'll feel like the world is eavesdropping on your soul, and in a way, it is. Because once you activate the frequency of the ancient prayer, the field begins to mirror you. Not your surface, your core. And if that core is still cluttered with doubt, fear, guilt around money, the field will show you chaos. But if you clear it, if you continue, speaking, walking, being the code, the universe adjusts. Not because it loves you more, not because it's rewarding you, but because it now recognizes you, like a key finally fitting into the right lock. This is what the elite call effortless momentum. But what they won't tell you is that it isn't about effort at all. It's about identity. Who you are when no one's watching. Who you are when you pay the bill, when you tip the waiter, when you speak about your own worth. The system conditioned you to lower your eyes, to shrink, to say, I can't afford that. But now those words taste like lies, because part of you knows they were never true, that you were born with access, that you came here coded for expansion. And the prayer, it simply turned the signal back on. Now you're transmitting, and reality is listening. But here's where it gets real. Most people, when this shift begins, sabotage it. They get scared, they backtrack. The old program pulls them down like quicksand, not because they don't want wealth, but because they don't believe they deserve it. So before we go deeper into the second part of the prayer, we have to confront that wound directly. The wound of unworthiness, the root infection the system embedded to keep you chasing what was always yours. This is the part they never talk about, the part that makes even the most powerful retreat into silence, the shame, the quiet, crawling, hidden belief that says, not me, I'm not enough, I'm not worthy. You've felt it, haven't you? That cold flash in the chest when something good begins to come your way, and part of you instantly braces for it to be taken. That's not your fault. That's programming. That's decades of repetition, of trauma, of spiritual gaslighting disguised as humility. Blessed are the poor, they said, but they didn't tell you that was a mistranslation. That in the oldest tongue it meant, blessed are those without attachment to false wealth, not those in lack. But they used it to keep you bowed, begging, apologizing for wanting more. And now every time abundance knocks at your door, your nervous system flinches. You push it away. You delay it. You sabotage it with small decisions, underpricing your worth, procrastinating the idea, staying in environments that drain you. Why? Because deep down, the child in you still thinks that being wealthy means being rejected, that if you become too much, they'll leave. They'll mock you. They'll say, who do you think so you are? And the truth is you don't know, because they never let you find out. The system gave you an identity, obedient, humble, manageable, but it stole the real one, the one who walks in beauty and confidence and sacred richness, the one who doesn't beg for miracles because they are the miracle. That's who you're remembering now. And the second part of the prayer, the part we speak not with sound, but with self-permission, begins to heal that wound. It says, I am not asking to be worthy. I am remembering that I always was. That's not a quote. That's an activation. Say it again. I am not asking to be worthy. I am remembering that I always was. Let it sink. Let it rise. Let the old script crack and peel. Because only when you shed that illusion can the final phase of the prayer enter, the one that seals the frequency and makes your field unshakable. Now comes the part they fear the most. Not the words you speak, but the silence that follows. Because in that silence, something irreversible happens. You begin to believe, not in a theory, not in a fantasy, but in yourself. And that's what collapses the system. The third and final layer of the prayer doesn't sound like a mantra. It doesn't require repetition. It's a state, a knowing, that begins to vibrate inside you like a hidden sun turning on. And once it's on, you can't turn it off. You walk into a room and energy shifts. You speak, and people listen differently. You make decisions that align with a deeper timeline, not out of fear but from clarity. And this is where the prayer becomes dangerous to those in power. Because when you carry this field, the systems built on manipulation, on dependency, on scarcity, they lose their grip. You become untouchable. Not because you fight them, but because you no longer need them. That's what real wealth is. The collapse of need, the end of begging, the embodiment of sufficiency. And it shows up in strange ways. You begin noticing patterns, synchronicities. Your intuition sharpens. You move without hesitation, and the people around you, they either rise to meet your frequency or disappear. That's the pruning, the purification, the natural consequence of realignment, because when you vibrate like wealth, you no longer attract chaos disguised as opportunity. You attract clarity, flow, peace, not perfection, but resonance. And from that resonance, money comes. Inflows return, not as a reward, but as a mirror. You've become the prayer, not the words, the being. And that right there is what they never wanted you to discover. That wealth was never outside of you. It was encoded in your design, hidden behind shame, guilt, obedience. But now you've remembered, and there's no turning back. The activation is complete, but the revelation is just beginning. And now it hits you, not like an idea, but like thunder inside your chest. A realization so heavy it nearly steals your breath. You were never broken. You were trained to be. Every delay, every failure, every self-sabotage wasn't your fault. It was architecture, built into you, installed when you were too young to refuse it. They told you to be quiet, to be grateful for little, to avoid attention, to shrink when praised. They stole your roar and replaced it with a whisper. But now you remember. You remember standing tall before this life. You remember choosing power, choosing wealth, choosing expansion. And you remember the moment they covered your light with labels: sinner, unworthy, poor, unimportant. Those lies became laws in your body, and you obeyed them for years, but not anymore. Because now you see it. You see the entire system, the illusion of lack, the programming of obedience, the weaponized guilt used to keep you in line. And in this moment, something inside you snaps. The grief rises, not because you failed, but because you believed them. You believed you had to earn what was already yours. You begged for crumbs while holding a banquet in your soul. And now the tears come, not from weakness, but from release. You're not the same. You'll never be the same. The wealth you seek is already responding, not because you chased it, but because you became it. The prayer was never outside. It lived beneath the scar tissue of your story, waiting for this exact moment, this remembrance. Say it one last time. Elazar, Onkai, Teshumael. Let the sound vibrate through the pain, through the silence, through every timeline where you forgot who you are, because now you've come home. You are the frequency, you are the vessel, you are the inheritance, and the world will never again meet you as less than what you truly are. Is this story resonating with you? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's continue. And now silence, not emptiness, but presence. The kind of silence that follows a storm, when the earth breathes deeper than before. Something in you has shifted, not just an emotion, not just an idea, but a remembering that rearranges everything. You may not notice it all at once. Maybe it starts with how you sit, how you walk, how you breathe. A little slower, a little taller, a little more like someone who's no longer waiting for life to begin. That's how it starts. Not with fireworks, but with frequency. And soon you'll see it in the mirror, in the numbers, in the conversations you no longer entertain, in the boundaries you hold without apology, in the abundance that flows. Not because you begged, but because you finally allowed. You've just walked through something ancient, something forbidden, something sacred, and it didn't require a temple or a guru or permission, just your attention, your willingness to listen past the noise, to feel what was never meant to be spoken. And now it's yours. The prayer, the presence, the power, not as a technique, but as a way of being. Don't rush back to the world too quickly. Let this stay with you. Walk with it. Speak less for a while. Observe more. Watch what changes around you and within you, because the true wealth isn't in what you now have. It's in what you'll never again forget. You were always the temple. You were always the channel. You were always the code. They just buried it under obedience, but you just dug it up, and now the world will feel you differently, even in silence, especially in silence. Have you ever done something kind that changed a life forever? Tell me in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, Share it with someone who needs to remember who they are.